Hello and welcome. This is Health Promotion Practices Author Interviews, and my name is Arden Castle. Each episode will explore a recently published article and its author. This week, I am joined by Dr. LaNita Wright, author of Pastors' Perceptions of the Black Church's Role in Teen Pregnancy Prevention, which was published in May 2020. This episode is focused on her professional career, which is just one part of a three-part series with Dr. LaNita Wright. Tune in to our other episodes to hear more about her and our other authors. Without further ado, welcome Dr. LaNita Wright. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Arden. I'm doing so well. I'm so happy to be here with you today. It's a great day here. We're preparing for storms, but it's still a great day nevertheless.
Excellent. Well, I hope that you are safe and sound with all the storming going on. So you currently work for Kennesaw State University and serve on the editorial board for Health Promotion Practice. Can you tell me a little about your roles and responsibilities you hold in each position?
Sure. So I recently transitioned to Kennesaw State about a month ago. So I'm new to the faculty team at Kennesaw State University, but I'm honored to serve in the public health education program, which is housed in the Department of Health Promotion and Physical Education. And so essentially, some of my responsibilities include to teach primarily undergraduate students. Currently, I'm teaching a public health theory type of course, and then a health promotion and program planning type of course as well. And then I also, in addition to teaching, conduct research. And so, of course, with me being newer to the area, still developing my research lines here. But we'll talk a little bit about my research interests, but I'll be further conducting studies there on campus with other faculty and then also with students. In addition to Kennesaw State, I also had the pleasure of serving on the Health Promotion Practice Board, where I'm a member of the editorial board. And essentially, I look at my role as a person who's going to continue to advocate for and push for really highlighting people of color. So especially Black authors, especially women, Black women authors, and really being a change agent as best as I can as a member on the board. And so whatever that looks like, that's what I'm honored to do. So just as an example, just this spring, Dr. Kathleen Rowe, the editor-in-chief, and I worked together to do a presentation at the Society for Public Health Education National Conference. And what we did there was we talked about Black women as change agents. And I spent a little time prior to this interview, prior to that conference presentation, interviewing 7 Black women researchers and practitioners and asking them about their role as researchers and practitioners, what they would recommend for the field, and especially as it relates to publishing and even their recommendations for health promotion practice. And so I was honored to serve in that capacity and to serve alongside Dr. Rowe in those efforts, again, to really highlight and amplify Black voices, and then to hopefully continue to be a change agent in our field.
Excellent. And I love how much advocacy you've included into your work and really taking responsibility for the roles that you do hold and the power that those do grant you. I think that that's really exciting. And with your work and involvement in both of those spaces, has your calling always been toward public health, and what drew you to the field?
That's a really great question. I initially thought I was going to go into clinic administration. So I really wanted to be a hospital or some sort of healthcare facility administrator. That was my goal when I was working on my undergraduate degree. And then towards the end of my undergraduate degree, and this, of course, after changing my major several times, but at the end of my undergraduate career, I realized that I did not want to do that. So I did not want to do hospital administration at all. And of course, it's still an important aspect of public health is healthcare administration and policy efforts. But I realized that part of public health was not my calling. And so I talked to my advisor about it and I asked her what she thought. I told her my passions. And she said, honestly, you're more interested in health promotion, the health promotion aspects of public health. And so she recommended that I try to obtain a Master of Public Health degree and be able to study more specifically about health promotion efforts. And so that's how I kind of transitioned into health promotion, that aspect of public health, and learning more about that. And then I'll share that when I started the NPH career and that educational journey, I learned about health promotion, but then I realized I had such a strong passion for teen pregnancy prevention and for sexual health, especially in the Black community, because there are so many disparities. And I just could not understand why there were so many disparities that were existing. So I wanted to be a part of the solution and not just knowing about this information, but actually a part of the solution. So that's how I really found my passion in teen pregnancy prevention and youth development, and learning more about how to really be a part of solutions. How can I be a part of change? And so I spent some time working at a local health department and taught teen pregnancy prevention education or sexuality education in middle schools and high schools in the local community. And then eventually went back after several years and decided to further my education so that I could also train future public health professionals. So I would say yes and no, right? So I've always had some sort of passion in public health, but my passion related to health promotion has definitely evolved over the years.
That's really exciting to hear. And it sounds like, you know, originally maybe you were thinking of working further downstream, but as you learned more and more information, thinking about moving upstream and really being preventative, like you're saying, being part of the solution that kind of prevents us from continuing to be such a pervasive thing and really addressing those disparities. I think that's really exciting. And I think that's really like the nature of getting into public health, is that we kind of see these bigger systems and structures. I want to touch on, how has your identity shaped the way you interact with public health? And what are some of the salient parts of your identity that you see interacting in your work?
Absolutely. So I know we'll talk about this later, but some of the research I've conducted already is related to the Black church system and how the Black church influences Black communities. And I'll just mention, I do identify as a Black person. I am a female. I'm an auntie. I'm a daughter. I am a cousin. I have a strong emphasis on family, a strong emphasis on my friends and those networks and how family and friends influence me and how I influence my family and friends. I also consider myself to be a mentor. And so I have several mentees and young people in my life who I really value and pour into as much as possible. I also consider myself to be a Christian. And so by identifying in so many different spaces, personal spaces, in addition to my professional spaces, of being a researcher, an advocate, and being a teacher, right, being a facilitator, I've noticed that a lot of my identities have really merged, not only personally, but also professionally. And so I'll just mention, over time, I developed a really strong interest in teen pregnancy prevention, but I also want to mention that a lot of my interest in the Black church system really rose from my involvement in the Black church system and seeing how much, as a youth director, so as someone who works in a Black church and someone who pours into young people in that setting and sees the impact of mentors and other congregants in the Black church community and how they really influence young people, I really wanted to pour more into that, not only in my personal life, but in my professional life. So I absolutely see a lot of my identity really, it's like a melting pot, honestly. Everything really stirs together. And I love that because it honestly keeps me so passionate about the work that I do. So much so that days when I don't feel like writing, or I don't feel like working on that grant proposal, or if I don't feel like pulling something together, I know that I need to do it because the work that I'm doing is meaningful and is work that I am really passionate about. And I know that it's work that is going to have a long lasting effect in other people's lives. So my identity definitely influences the work that I do. And I'm so happy that it does.
I love that. I love that you're happy and unforgiving about your identities and the way that all of these pieces intersect, and, like, you know, at a bigger level, the intersectionality, that you can't separate these, but that you really leaned into how those all connect, and not only in your work, but your personal life, and how all of these can really strengthen the work that you do. And I've noticed you mentioned talking about mentors, and what did it mean for you to have a mentor that looked like you?
That's a great question. I want to mention two specific people in my life. So first of all, I'll mention my mom's, one of her closest friends. I consider her to be a mentor to me. And I also credit her as someone who truly introduced me to public health, because she was a person who hired me as an arts and crafts teacher at the Drug Education Council's summer camp. And as a college student, right, I was transitioning from high school to college. I thought, why am I teaching arts and crafts at this summer camp? I don't think I'm qualified. You have all of these qualified teachers who are teaching these different classes. And she said, yes, you are qualified. And I know that you're qualified because of these reasons. And these young people need you. And I thought, okay, if you say so. And so I really, she really encouraged me to show up in that space. And I was able to learn about the influence that you can have on a young person's life so quickly. So just by showing that you care and actually meaning that you care, it makes a huge difference. So not only did I see that for myself firsthand with the young people who were part of the summer camp, but also I saw that in her with how she believed in me, important to me as a high schooler. And then as someone who was transitioning and not really knowing what they were doing with their lives, she really focused on still pouring into me. And I really consider her to be one of my most significant mentors in my life. And I appreciate everything that she did for me then, encouraging me. And then over the years, she has still been a consistent mentor in my life. So having someone who looked like me, who was working in a field, was making a difference, she was passionate about what she did, that meant everything to me. And I am so incredibly blessed to have someone like her in my life. And I hope to be that sort of mentor to other young people as well. And then secondly, I'll mention, just to mention academia in addition to my personal life, but I also have a mentor who's in an academic space. And we actually were recently talking, and I shared with her how much I really look up to her, because I'd never mentioned that to her. But I met her. She was my first Black female faculty member that I had ever had a chance of interacting with in the class setting. And I met her in the Master Public Health program. And she was one of the co-faculty for the Introduction to Epidemiology course that I took then. And so I remember walking into the space and thinking, yes, I have a Black teacher. So I had to meet her. I wanted to interact with her. And it's just that you saw the joy on my face just then. So just imagine the joy on my face when I walked in and thinking, oh my gosh, I get to actually interact with the Black faculty member. There's someone who looks like me who's going to be teaching me. And so because in all of my schooling up until that point, I've been at predominantly white institutions, I had honestly never had someone who looked like me in that space, and someone who I could actually talk to perhaps about their hurdles and their challenges and their successes and all of those sorts of things, especially as a Black female and someone in public health and in academia. So from that point on, I don't know if she knew it, but she was immediately my mentor. So I reached out to her, and we developed a great relationship over time. And like I mentioned, even recently we were talking, and I shared with her how much I appreciated her being a mentor in my life and pouring into me, even when she didn't realize I looked to her as a mentor. I just appreciated that. So I would just finally say that representation matters. So all of that to say, when I think about mentors, and especially a mentor who looks like me, representation matters. So whether that's in academia, that's in research, that's in practice, whatever space that is, representation matters.
I absolutely agree. And I think one of the parts that was kind of my favorite part of what you just spoke about was that she was your mentor, whether she knew it or not, that having someone there that looked like you was building this bridge that you needed. And whether or not she knew she was taking on that role or she was intentionally doing that, that was really important for you to have. And I'm curious, what has been your experience as a faculty member now, kind of switching roles in a predominantly white institution?
I would honestly say to you, it has been a constant juggling act. That is the best way that I could probably paint the picture for you. It's a juggling act, because there are constant struggles with trying to figure out how to not do too much and how to not do too little. And what I mean by that is oftentimes what happens in spaces, especially as a Black female in a predominantly white institution, you oftentimes, or I'll speak for myself, I oftentimes want to speak up and speak out and advocate for every issue that is important to me, because I think it is so incredibly important to own your voice and to really speak up and speak out, especially if there are issues related to systemic racism, or especially blatant issues, but then also even if there are very covert issues that are going on that may not be as obvious, I think it's important to really call out issues, right, in those spaces, especially on predominantly white institution campuses. I will also mention, as a faculty member who is working towards tenure, who's working towards promotion, who does not have job security, right, it is a constant juggling act to figure out what is my place as it relates to how much do I speak out And then how much can I deal with if I don't speak out enough? And so for me, I want to make sure, again, that I'm owning my voice and that I'm never cowering to anyone else, or I'm never censoring myself. I remember here recently, actually in March, one of my own personal public health rock stars, she was talking to me and she encouraged me to never self-censor. She said, do not ever censor yourself. So always own your voice. Don't feel afraid to speak up if something is happening. You always want to surround yourself with a supportive group and a network so that you're not the only one speaking up all the time. You're not always by yourself. But she encouraged me to never self-censor. And that was something I needed to hear. And that just happened. And I've been in academia for 6 years now. And that just happened this year where someone told me to not back down. And so the fact that she brought that up and really spoke to, issues that could exist in academia, that really encouraged me to figure out a way to speak up as much as possible, or to at least try to influence systems, especially as much as I could. So it is a constant, if I'm being honest with you, Arden, it is a constant thought of mine. I constantly think about how I can be a beneficial member of systems in predominantly white institutions, so that I'm constantly advocating for and amplifying not only Black voices, but voices of women and other people of color. But again, for me, especially Black voices, how can I continue to do that in a way that it can be received, in a way that can actually influence change? And I would go back to this notion of being a change agent. So I want to be a part of the solution. So it is constantly on my mind about how do I navigate this professional sphere in a way that makes the most sense.
I definitely see that in your work, and thinking about how when you enter a place that has historical and systemic racism, usually we think, oh, policy will change at the largest level. But what happens when you actually enter those spaces as a professional, and how do we advocate for the things that we believe in and name racism when we see it and be a change agent, as you said. So I think that that's really exciting, and it's really interesting to see what happens from the inside and what it's like to be in those predominantly white institutions.
And I want to mention, Arden, you bring up a great point about, I absolutely want, and I'm sure those who are advocating in space, especially as it relates to academia, we absolutely want policy changes, right? So you absolutely want to advocate for the recruitment and retention of more Black faculty and staff, right? The recruitment and retention of more faculty and staff of color, the recruitment and retention of more women who are faculty and staff. Of course, we want to have policy that is set in order to do that. But when you enter into spaces and those policies are not already set or could be years in the making, what can you do right on your individual level to also be a part of that change? And so that is the part I think we should consider, being a part of the change as far as policy related issues are concerned, absolutely being a part of institutional changes, community changes at the broader levels, of course, of influence. And then also for me, I think about, okay, what can I do as an individual in order to promote? For me, it's important for me to promote other Black voices and to really help to train up. And so I'll just mention one thing that I've done in this academic space is to try to actively recruit student researchers who are of color. And so I intentionally try to incorporate students, especially Black students and women and other students of color, into the research that I do, so that they are able to have a firsthand experience in conducting research. Because when you think about who gets the types of jobs that they want, who is able to get into these different positions, people who have experience, of course, then also people who have connections. So I really want to be being a part of that connection and experience, the process for especially undergraduate students. I think it is so incredibly important to do that, for me, that's something that I can personally do in order to ensure that they're able to learn in these spaces, but also to overcome perhaps some resource issues and some barrier issues that they could face later.
I love that you're being intentional about who you're recruiting and understanding the systems and structures that are preventing these students from having access to these resources and opportunities, and giving them these opportunities because maybe their classmates already have access to these things and will already have a leg up in getting the jobs that they want. And so as a student myself, I think that that's really exciting to know that there's faculty out there, you specifically, who are thinking about who